The magic mask has arrived in Fusion, so finally I can do AI-powered mask creation both with Fusion Studio, the standalone software, or in the Fusion tab of DaVinci Resolve. I will show you exactly how it works, how I create good masks with the magic mask, and I will go through different scenarios with different challenges and show you how I can get the mask there and how I can do it properly in combination with the other tools that I have in Fusion. So I might use it at the end for compositing, I might use it as a supporting tool in green screen work, or I might just do it to create better masks that I send onwards to the color page for color grading, or if you want to do some color corrections in Fusion. Lots of tips and tricks coming up around the magic mask. Let's get started. Let's start out with a fairly simple example. I'm tempted to say for children because I have the swing here, although I think it might be a bit harder than that. Nonetheless, I want to select the sitting area here of the swing, and I also select just the sitting area without selecting the chain. So there are a few complications, but it is a simple example insofar as the contrast is really good. So you really see a clean edge, at least here. It does go a little bit out of focus in some areas, which can produce a bit of a challenge, but nonetheless, it's good to start with. I could do it in the color page, especially if I just want to do something like recolor the sitting area. I could do it in the color page, but we are starting out and then we'll do more in Fusion, so let's start in Fusion right away. I am going to the effects library to show you where it is. In the tools section under the matte category you find all the keying and mask manipulation tools, etc., and also this magic mask tool. So let me bring it into the flow and close this. And the principle is that you start on one frame, start selecting the object, and then from there the algorithm needs to track the mask from one frame towards the other frames. So it's important to select a good starting point. So usually you want to find a frame where the object is well in view, so ideally the entire object. So for example here at the front we see less of the sitting area, so I would probably look for something where I see most. However, it's also getting a bit out of focus here. There's a bit of a focus issue here, so I might look for some compromise so that the texture is well in focus, which should also help the algorithm. Then when I have selected the frame, and selecting just means go on the frame, then I can immediately start drawing here in the viewer. You see this plus symbol. I'm drawing to add strokes, so I can do this. The first stroke sometimes takes a little bit. There can be a bit of lag until it's computed. You see on the tool, when the tool is indicated in green, that means that the CPU or GPU or both are running and computing it. So magic mask does require good GPU. And then it takes a bit more time for the first stroke, but then you can usually work quite fluently from then onwards. So you see my first stroke immediately got the sitting area, but didn't got the area underneath. I did go over the texture here, but I didn't go over this. So often it's a good trick to go like over edges within the object to make sure the algorithm understands that both parts are belonging to the same object. So you can add strokes like this. If you add strokes that do nothing or do the wrong thing, you can delete strokes again. If you want to do it via the menu, you can do it here. You just go on select strokes. Then you get a box selection tool where you can select one or more strokes and can press here delete to remove them. And you see this wasn't a good idea to delete them. I'm just demonstrating. Generally you might find it difficult to work just like this because you don't see the background. So I always work with two viewers and bring the media in on the left side. So I have a second viewer. Let me go back to add and add another stroke here. Now you can also use keyboard shortcuts. Let me again create a stroke which maybe I don't need. So sometimes something negative happens depending on where you place the stroke. If you think it was a bad idea, just hit the shift key. Holding the shift key will on the fly switch from the plus to the select option, which is a bit easier, and then just delete key so you don't need to use the menu. So this seems to work quite well. I'm still missing some area here of the seat. Let me add this. And once I bring this in, I get the chain as well. And probably also here. Let's see, how is it here? Yeah, there's also something missing here. Let's try. Yeah, so that's probably unavoidable. You can try to use negative strokes. So you can do a subtraction stroke by going here on subtract. Or if you want to do it via keyboard, always stay on add and then use the alt key, and that will also change the plus to minus and create a subtraction. You can try this, but you see it's quite difficult to subtract properly. You know, it does work, but sometimes it doesn't work so well. I think the subtraction works especially well if you just have the occasional like background flickering, but if you have other objects which in itself are very well identifiable, I don't always have the best experience with the subtraction stroke. What I do in those cases is, what sometimes tends to be easier, is track the second object as well. So in this case, subtracting the chain seems to be a bit tricky, but I can probably create a second magic mask and only select the chain. It's a bit of a different approach. Try the subtraction stroke if it works good. Here in this case, I have a bit of a problem with this. So I tried before, I couldn't find a solution which really worked well. So let's delete the strokes. You can also undo, of course. Yeah, let's delete those and stick to the positive strokes. One more setting I want to point out right away is this mode here, faster and better. So better sounds like it's always better. Usually it is. It takes more time to compute, but most importantly, it tries to also include soft areas. So it computes not a hard mask, but a soft mask. And here in this case, you see I'm getting closer to the edge here. How much softness is controlled mostly by this range. I can still fix problems later. I can still fix problems on the created alpha channel. I can just see that the upper edge here, that I'm getting this edge mostly. If there's a problem in the middle, I fix it later, but I see that I get this edge, and here it's getting too soft. I get stuff all around, and if I go here, I'm getting close, and I see that I get a consistent edge, which is a good starting point. Again, I do have more than I need from the chain. I'll deal with it separately. And before I do that, let me do the tracking. So I go here up to the tracking options, the track forward and backwards. In principle, you can do it step by step. You can track a bit forward, perhaps do some changes, track backwards, but you have to start on the frame where you're drawing. So to go to this frame, if you moved somewhere else in between, you just hit here this button, go to reference frame. You start from there, and again, usually just track forward and backward. And what will happen is it tracks in both directions, and at the same time you can look at these grayed out sliders. They don't do anything for you, so you can't change them. They are being set automatically, but they give an indication to which frames have valid tracking data. So right now it says reference time, which is where I'm starting, and then the range, which is no range, so just this frame. And once I start tracking, it starts tracking forward frame by frame till the end of the render range, the yellow render range, and then it jumps back to the reference frame where the strokes are, and from there it tracks backwards to the beginning of the render range. Depending on your machine, it can take a while. So I have an RTX 3090 GPU, so it's pretty fast for me, but it still takes a little bit of time. So here we go, result is there, and we can see forward and backward how it goes. And in this case, it looks like we have a pretty good selection. If there are any problems that you notice, you can start correcting things. Assume there's some problem here at the end. I can do positive or negative strokes. Let's assume there was some, we don't really have an issue here, but let's try to put a negative stroke here and maybe a positive here to counteract, to get this edge a little better. If you do that, then you are invalidating part of your render range. So from the initial starting point until the frame where you make your first change. So in this case, it was tracking forward from this point until here. So those frames are still valid, and the ones before are still valid. They still work. But now here where I made the new stroke, from there onwards, it's invalid, and this part needs to be tracked again. Even if you change your mind, let's say I delete those strokes again because I don't really need them, you see this frame no longer has valid tracking data. Before it has, but here not anymore. But doesn't really matter. You can, you just have to retrack the remaining frames. If you want, you can go to the last frame of the tracked area, which in this case is this frame, and from this last frame onwards track forward, and I'll just track to the end. Or you could press the forward backward button again. But in this case, you're just completing the remaining render range, and the indicator here shows you which frames have been processed. So for this example, I don't really need to do this. What I do need to do is worry about the chain. Let's create a second magic mask, and this time I bring it in via the Shift spacebar menu, which is faster. Just type magic mask, there it is. And I bring it out separately and bring it into the view. And now I want to get the chain. And here, let me just get not one where it's so blurry, but start like somewhere else where it's really crisp and clear. So here the chain is pretty clearly visible. And I select it here and check on this viewer to get more. I want this part as well. That's pretty good. I could try to get it from down here. I want these bits as well. Careful that I'm not getting the black area. So this tends to work quite well. I don't need the entire thing, although, well, I mean, since depends how much did we have here. We have a lot up there. I can always add a simple mask, rather than spending lots of time on the magic mask. But I make sure that I have it well selected here. And again, if you want, let's do a bit more just to see how well it works. Should I do better? I'm getting here more of the swing for better, whereas for faster, I'm getting less problems here. Let's try a negative stroke and then better. Can experiment with this. All right, track forward and backward. That's it. And now I will do the following. I will use this mask. Let me show you again the magic mask number 1, and maybe I should rename it magic mask 1. This is the one for the seed. And this one is for the chain. And I can use one as the garbage mat input to the other. If I hold Alt while connecting, you see the names of the inputs, and I can connect it to the garbage mat. And you see that works, except that there is a bit of something left over. So let me look on the left viewer on the chain mask in more detail and have a look at the alpha channel. And you see that it's a bit noisy and so on. So I will do the following. I will go to the second tab here, which is the matte tab. And in this one, I can use the threshold parameters. These are basically the normal alpha manipulation tools. You see them in all the keying tools, in the matte control tool. Pretty much the same for manipulating the alpha channel. So in this case, let's make this harder bright. And you see the mask expands a bit into the soft areas, and thereby I seem to be able to get out most of the stuff up here. Although we do see here this problem. You know what? I will do a quick roto. Let's do the following. Let's do a quick polygon, and I'll just go over the swing like this. And I will track this with a simple point tracker to the swing. Of course, I could try to track the entire swing, but the swing is like tilting and shifting and so on, so that's difficult. But a simple mask which just moves along, I can track with one point, whereas the swing, does this. So a simple mask should be able to track that. I will track it via the center point, modify with tracker unsteady position. If you have done my tutorial on point tracking, you would be familiar with this. If you're not familiar with point tracking, don't worry too much, just follow the steps and you should be able to reproduce this for this specific task. So now here I have on this polygon, I have a modifier. In the modifier, I need a tracker source where I use the media in one as tracker source, and I have a point to select, and I'll select like the bottom area here of the chain on the original image, and drag this from there to the end, and hopefully this worked just with one click. I didn't have it in the viewer. Okay, never mind, I think that worked. I'm optimistic. And I'll attach this now to the solid mat of this one here. So meaning I'm getting this area automatically alongside. You see this is all being added. And if I put all this solid area into the garbage mat input here, then we are cleanly removing all of this. So a little bit of tracking addition. I thought this was a simple example. Sorry, it looks like I'm getting carried away, but good to know, right? These kind of techniques anyways. So if you don't want to go that far, just track the entire thing with the chain and enjoy having a chain and color it blue as well. So this is the more advanced selection, and now I think I'm done. Let's have a look from beginning to end. If this looks good. I'm not 100% done yet. I think it looks a little bit too soft in some areas. Let me look at the alpha channel side by side. And yeah, so it looks too soft and there's still a little bit left over. I will go into the matte part of this magic mask down here and reduce this soft area a bit from the low threshold. So basically make these soft things black. And we can do a bit restore fringe, which is kind of counteracting things that we lost here on the edge there. And I realized that this edge here is not 100% perfect, but this is also like the blurry part. If you need to, if you expect like a soft edge, you might add a little bit blur again, not too much, but just so that it's realistic here, and this will automatically help a bit on the upper edge as well. The other tools, erode, gamma. Again, if you are a bit familiar with keying and mask manipulations, you can, erode the entire thing or shrink the entire thing, which is often a more aggressive approach. And gamma will, if you have semi-transparent areas, make them a bit more or less semi-transparent. Then the gamma slider works quite well. All right. But I'll leave it at this and now want to do something with it. You can do something in Fusion if you like, maybe add a color corrector and color it. Or if you want to bring it to the color page, if you're a colorist or more familiar in the color page or just like doing it, just add another media out node. Quick reminder, if you are not familiar, media out 2 has an index which is automatically different from this. So the main index is 0, which is for the back to the edit page and the main grading tools, and the higher index is for additional outputs which can be used as inputs in the color page. So if you want to set something else to the color page, additional output, and then in the color page, if you head over to the color page, you need an additional source, and I just see that I sent the main one as well. So let me go back to Fusion and send this only to the color page and the original image to the media out 1. So if I do this, I have the original media, and then here right click, add source for the second output, and this one I can connect to the mask input. Again, this is not Magic Mask specific, just workflow specific. So in this case, I have my mask attached from the Magic Mask to the color page. And now if I color it blue, it ends up becoming blue, and you can refine it and come up with some fancy result here. Before I move on, let me mention a few more basic things about the Magic Mask tool. So you have seen this disk cache, maybe. It says regenerate all and clear. So the disk cache is when you are tracking, files are being stored on disk, frame by frame, the mask is being stored on disk. Otherwise, the computational time would just be too much to always process it on the fly. So it's automatically cached on disk. You can do here right click on the disk cache to show the cache folder. But basically this is inside your regular Resolve cache folder. So if you're using cache from the edit page, your normal render cache, this is in the same folder. Also means that if you delete your render cache, it should be deleted once when you're done with the project and delete your render cache. This should go away, but you can clear it manually. Another thing to realize about this is that these files are not automatically being copied along if you copy something in the Fusion flow. That could easily lead to accidents. when you, for example, when you're copying the entire composition or just copying the tool or copying the clip. So in these cases, this is not automatically doing like a lot of copying on disk, but you have to regenerate the cache afterwards. So if this copy, if I connect this this copy, you see if I bring this into it's in the right viewer, you see there's nothing selected here, right? So I need to regenerate it. Finally, I haven't mentioned the clear strokes part, but it's pretty clear what it means. So range is the render range. So you can, if you work on just part of it, you can reduce your render range. If you need to make additional strokes for a shorter duration, you can work on reduced render range. And if you change your mind, clear the strokes in the range with the range tab, or clear on just the current frame, clear all the strokes on a current frame when you add more strokes on later frames, or clear everything from all frames, in which case you have to start over basically. Okay, that's it for the introduction to the tool, and the first example, which you see already had a few minor complications. Now let's look at something even more challenging. And I want to look at this clip here and want to select the cup. And this is really challenging, and you can immediately see that it's challenging when you zoom in a bit and think about what the AI algorithm has to do here. So if you try to do this with the magic mask, you see down here, you know that there is a clear edge for this cup. But if you zoom in, you realize that the color of the cup and the color of the ocean is exactly the same. So for any keying, this is a challenge. The AI algorithm gets additionally confused because there's some black line coming in, which I know is written on the cup because I understand what a cup is. I know what the shape is. I know that it rotates. The AI algorithm looks for patterns that delineate objects, and it has problems with this. So I tried this multiple times to get any solution for this cup, and I couldn't come up with anything. There were always holes in this. Rather than spending hours and hours trying to tune the magic mask in order to get the best result, I just decided to rotoscope the cup. So with a little bit of experience in rotoscoping for a short clip like this, you can rotoscope a cup like this in maybe 15 minutes or so. I have already done that because I don't want to sit here now in the tutorial for the next 15 minutes. I have used a B-spline, and just to explain, I made like a control point here or two control points there to get the lowest point of the cup, and then another one to get the highest point, likewise here at the end. And then I have one additional point here, and this point I'm using to determine the curvature. So just one point to match the curvature. And with this, you see, I went through and made like a keyframe like every 10-15 frames, something like this, and was able to get a pretty decent mask. I'm not saying that it can't be improved in some places, but this is a tight and solid mask. Now the tutorial is called Magic Mask, so why am I talking about rotoscoping? Well, I can still use the Magic Mask, for example, for the fish. The fish itself has clear boundaries, relatively clear, in front of the cup. If you see here, this boundary is very nice visible. So even if part of the image fails, maybe some other part works. So rather than rotoscoping everything, let's try the fish. Bring it in, Magic Mask, and this time I'll try to be a bit faster. I'll go like maybe across the eye, which is a good point of contrast, and maybe here across some of these stripes, and here with the fin I have to pay attention. I want the fin here, and let's try a negative stroke. Yeah, that seems to work reasonably well. Let's try here again. Okay, so this gives a pretty hard mask. What happens if I go on better? Okay, it does look better. So a little bit of soft edge is usually preferred anyways. If not, we can always later use the blur parameter to make the edge a bit softer. But let's start from here. Track forward and backward. I use the frame where I see the entire fish, right? The fish is a bit wriggling and turning around, but not much. Now, if my goal is to work on the cup keep in mind that we don't necessarily need a great result like here, because we only need a good result where the fish is overlapping with the cup. But nonetheless, maybe you want to do something with the fish as well. And you see even the fish turning around, even that worked, which I think is pretty amazing. I did not expect that this would work, honestly, when I started this clip. But now it worked. Good. I did see some minor issue. There's a little bit of like flickering here. It worked pretty well in this direction, and in this direction we get a bit of additional softness and flickering, which is probably not the end of the world. But we could try to go like to the first frame where this is introduced, and I see it's being introduced here at the end of the fin. So let me try, just as one update, try to put another negative stroke here, and maybe also one up here, just to see if we can still get this a bit better. Perhaps one more here, and then from here onwards it needs to get the rest of the render range till 131. It needs to get this again, so try again. Yeah, that didn't work very far. So with these negative strokes, unfortunately, often it works on 1-2 frames and then fails again. So what you could do is go through, and if you have the occasional like flickering, which sometimes happens, like here, then go there and then maybe track like frame by frame. Now this will then of course take time, but you can go, and then when you see something, remove it again, go further, and it's still faster than manual rotoscoping. But rather than tracking everything and then being disappointed and then going back, you just go frame by frame, and wherever you find the problem. And I'm away from the cup, I don't care anymore, so I'll just let it go. Okay, now I have a great cup because I rotoscoped it, and I have a great fish, so I can combine the two however I want. For example, add a matte control. And matte control is one of the super basic tools in Fusion. I have a separate tutorial on that one if you need to learn more about this tool. Matte control, and then I will connect the cup in the main background input. And for organizational purposes, let's bring it down and then bring this into the garbage matte like this. And now we have this and the fish being extracted. From here on, the only question is what effect you want to build. Let me show you an example that I have done ahead of time. So here I am first darkening the entire image. Then I'm cutting out the cup out of the image, cutting it out with a matte control attached to the garbage matte. And so this is the combined mask, which I'm cutting out. And then I want to blur the background. And in order to do this, I first use a clean plate tool where I erode the background. So into the cutout area, I bring background in. And I'm doing that for the only reason that I get a nicer blur of the background. Because if you apply a blur tool on top of this, if you look at the edge, it will blur like across this eroded area and give a very nice blur across the edge. If you don't do this, if you don't cut this out, you see that even on the background you see blurry parts from the cup. So if I merge the cup over, the cup is not blurred, but you see this edge problem. Whereas if I do this cutout approach, cut out and erode with the clean plate, then you see I get a much nicer edge for the edge blur. And then here I'm merging the original image back on top, masked out with the mask that I created, so that I'm putting only the cup on top. And over this I am doing another lens blur for the fish, so that the fish is also a little bit blurred. I'm using the lens blur, it's a bit nicer than the regular blur and can do a little bit with the highlights and give a bit of character to it. And I keep the fish bright and only the background dark and everything a bit blurred except for the cup, to put the cup in the center. That was my idea, just to do something after all the masking work, some little trick. So far I have only tracked objects, and Blackmagic Design says that the magic mask in Fusion is based on the object mask in the color page. So tracking objects probably works better than tracking people. However, also in the color page, I already noticed that sometimes the object mask works quite well on people as well. It's just not as good in identifying the overall shape of a person. Like if you need to track one area, like an arm or torso or something, that usually works equally well or almost as well. But it doesn't recognize immediately that a person has arms and legs and everything, and might rather identify individual objects. So that seems to be the main difference. But I can live with that actually, and I did a few different examples, different tests on different people to find out how far I can drive that. Let's try one here, which has a good chance of succeeding because she doesn't have like super loose hair in front of bright background and so on. This is always challenging. It's very challenging for chroma keying. It's challenging for the AI algorithm as well. So those are the examples I would start with. It's very easy to find examples where you basically have no chance. But here it should work. Let's bring it in. Magic mask. Let's go through the clip. She's pretty much in center everywhere. So yeah, so the legs are more at the beginning. So I'll start on frame 0, bring something over the face, and now you see why it's not a person mask. So you have to select individual objects, and I might go like this to go across boundaries where you might reasonably suspect new objects. You need more strokes. I still make small strokes, not like one huge one, because as the object moves, these strokes need to like go through the timeline. So it's better to make shorter strokes across meaningful contrast areas rather than huge strokes that try to cover everything. All right, this looks good. Here we have some garbage. Let me try to do this, remove this one. That's another thing. Sometimes I notice that rather placing more or clever strokes sometimes better than trying to remove outside. Sometimes a wrong stroke, even in a good place, can make the result worse. All right, so this looks like a good start. And let's track. Okay, and also, look at the alpha channel for comparison, see if there are any holes, if there are any problems, But this looks really like a really good start. Now, this was a very easy clip by any measure, dark foreground, bright background, no fuzzy hair detail, not a lot of movement from her. So as easy as it can go, but still getting a result which is so good that it actually looks like you can do compositing with it. And that is still surprising to me that the algorithm can get that good. And I actually did use it for compositing, and I'm not going to do like a full composite now, but I just want to give you a few ideas if you want to refine edges and use this for compositing. What I would probably do is lock this magic mask and do most of the mask manipulation separately. And the reason is it happens very easy if you have a bigger flow that you go back to the magic mask and accidentally click into the viewer and you have immediately made a stroke and you have to do the tracking again. So this can just happen by accident and it's annoying. So what I would do is lock it and do the alpha manipulation separately. You can do it here, sure, but again, then you have that risk once your composition gets bigger. So you might just lock it and then put your matte control node afterwards. You can do the same operations afterwards. If you need to make it a bit harder and clean out the foreground a bit. Maybe add some softness to the edge afterwards. You can do whatever the final composite requires. One thing what you might notice when you do this, especially if you extend the mask, let's do it by intention, like a bit to exaggerate. If you extend the mask, you will see that it becomes black because this node here has, well, in the color view, has already cut it out, so there's no RGB value left. So if you do the manipulation later, you can't extend the color channels anymore. That's okay if you only use the mask. So one way is to only use the mask, and later you do your composition with, let's say, some background. You do some background, then you have a merge node, you merge again the foreground over the background and use this only as a mask. So that works, right? So now you don't care about that. You have again the background from the original node, and you only use the mask from the matte control and from the magic mask. Another way is in the magic mask, unlock it for a second, and in the tracking down here, disable post multiply image. In this case, the alpha channel remains the same, but the rest is not being cleared out, so it's not multiplied by the alpha channel. The RGB values are still all there, and you see them here in this semi-transparent way above the checkerboard. And then you do your matte control, whatever, and at the end post multiply image, and then apply the alpha channel only at that stage. Maybe you do more, maybe you do manual color corrections or whatever, some blur tool, anything. You do a blur, you do color correction, whatever you like, and then at the very end you need to apply it. The matte control has this button for post multiply. If you use other tools and you need to do it at the very end, you just add at the very end a tool called alpha multiply, which does the exact same thing as this button. And there I have applied the mask. So I keep the RGB values as long as I want, and then at the end I apply the mask. So this I just want to give you as additional tips if you want to do more sophisticated compositing or other manipulations. You don't need to always go back into the magic mask. Maybe lock it to be safe so you don't need to regenerate it and then do all the manipulations outside. And just for a fun idea of what I could do with her, I have played around a little bit and used this background image purely for the fun of it. Used DaVinci Resolve's depth map tool to create a depth map, then put it into 3D space and displaced it with the depth map to the camera. And you see that's not perfect here on the edge of the bridge, but you do get the pathway here and the houses displayed properly, and there are some issues here. Never mind, just for the fun of it, I rendered this with an animated 3D camera move, went through some post-processing with a bit of color correction, white balance, blurring, etc. And then the final result is her cycling over this bridge. To push things a little bit, I also tried it on her. And whether you use object mask or magic mask with the person mode in the color page, I tried that as well. Either way, the challenge is the hair. So I'm getting her quite well. This softness here isn't necessarily wrong because, well, you also have semi-transparency here. There is like yellow sky and then yellow shiny fine hair. And it's always a question, where do you put the threshold? How much semi-transparency should be there? How much is too much? You can, of course, reduce it from the low threshold. You can reduce it and you see how it goes. That's the same as in green screen. You would have the same problem if this is the contrast. That's just a lack of contrast, and you have to make a decision. But the biggest problem with these cases is to have it consistent over the duration of the times. If I play this back, then you see that this is flickering like crazy. Because from frame to frame, the algorithm tries again and tries to identify the correct region. And now either you can really go like frame by frame with a red subtraction stroke and try to fix it almost hair by hair, and that will be a hell lot of work. Or you choose a yellow bright background, or you do some rather advanced trickery. Actually, the best thing I could come up with, and I tried some luma keying and some other thing, the best thing I could come up with, I noticed after a while, that the hair itself isn't moving so much. So she's smiling, her head is moving, her face is moving, but the individual hair there isn't a lot of movement in the hair. So I just took a still frame, made the hair as good as I wanted to, and then cut out the hair from the still frame and tracked it over the moving frame to replace the hair with simulated hair from a still frame. Not a topic for today, but sometimes I like to try crazy stuff. But these are the limitations. Fine hair is a challenge either way. In chroma keying, it's a challenge, and with magic AI tools, it's also a challenge. Speaking of keying, if we can use the object mask on people, as we clearly can, does it make sense to try it for green screen? I mean, I can use the delta keyer or I can use the magic mask. Green screen is intended to have good separation between foreground and background. That separation helps the keying algorithms. It also should help the magic mask. And that is the case, and I did indeed try it, and my conclusion was yes, but not a big advantage over the delta keyer in most cases. So here you see an example. The delta keyer is set up quite quickly. It's a very simple example, you know, good contrast, not a lot of shadows in the background, not a lot of hair detail, it's okay. So the delta keyer, I just tune a few parameters and it's done. The magic mask, I do a few strokes, and ideally it's also done unless I do the strokes in the wrong place and then I see the flickering or I see some green being occluded and then I have to refine and so on. I might also have to refine the delta keyer, but I don't need to recompute. So for a case like this, I don't really see an advantage of using the magic mask, even though if the final output, as you can see here, is almost the same. I can get a good result with the magic mask. I can get a good result with the delta keyer. I'm just faster working with the delta keyer. If you do use the magic mask for keying, you have to do despill separately because it doesn't do that. So the delta keyer does something inbuilt, which in this case actually works. Very often I don't trust the delta keyer despill, but in this case it actually works. Nonetheless, just an idea, you can always despill separately. And if you have done the Fusion certification training, either from Blackmagic Design, and I'm offering it on my website as training partner. So if you have done that training, you remember this keying example with camera movement and everything. And hair detail is a problem in this example. And another problem is shiny parts on the guitar and also these tracking markers, which can be left over in the key and the uneven background, etc. So the solution in the Blackmagic Design certification program, the way they present it there and the way I do it also in the course, is to use the typical masking, to use a holdout mask here for the guitar, because we have some shiny areas, some green areas and some reflections here, and use a holdout mask for this, or a solid mask to get rid of holes caused by those reflections. Let me show you in the alpha channel here. If I disconnect this for a second, you see there are in a few places, there are like holes turning up from the guitar. And that's what this mask is for, solid matte. And then the other one is for any garbage that's outside, and there isn't actually that much now. It's there if you zoom in, there are a few spots here and there, but that's what this garbage matte was made for. So these are the two masks that were done, and we did a bit of animation on the mask, a bit of rotoscoping. Now the rotoscoping part, depending on how detailed you need to do it, can be quite annoying. I still recommend practicing it, so if you have done this particular exercise in the past, don't worry, it's important to get a feel for that as well. We won't ever get fully rid of rotoscoping, I fear, but sometimes we can make things faster. So in this case, let me bring in the magic mask and try to get a magic mask like, let's make some strokes here, something over the face. Let me bring in the green screen and magic mask side by side. So we want the guitar, and I'm a bit rough here now, but I hope I don't need like the super detailed mask. I'm not looking for an accurate mask in the sense of accurate for compositing. I'm looking like for a mask that gets the minimum, and I'm making way too many strokes here. You know, never mind. I'll just need a very rough solution at the end. And with this solution, yes, I do get like some flickering here and there. If you go through, I'm cutting off some hair in a few places. So there are a lot of things which are not good for the edges with this magic mask here. And I would probably tune myself to death if I tried to get all the edges really, really good. So keying is most likely the faster and better solution. But if I just need something rough, let me turn on the alpha channel here. If I just need a rough solution, I can erode this like this, even higher if I need to, and use this mask as my garbage mask. Now this can potentially save you some time, and it can even help you make better garbage masks if you need to make them really close. Because my problem with the magic mask might be like only small edge detail. Now here the hair is going pretty far. It's depending on which frame you look at, there's like it's going quite far. But in many cases your edge detail is on a smaller scale, and you don't have to erode that far. You just have to erode maybe like this, and then you use the delta keyer for the detailed edge work, but you have a garbage mask. You never get it that good with rotoscoping unless you really spend a lot of time. We had another issue here, and that was the reflections on the guitar. Have to be a bit careful here being close to the guitar, so I would probably not use the same mask. I mean, the same mask here I could also erode in the other direction to get rid of, you know, anything that's outside, and then use this as a hard, solid inner mask, if it's hard or I need to make it hard. But in this case, I would probably do the guitar separately, because the guitar is also like directly overlapping with the green screen. But this edge, this is like a hard edge, so I might actually trust my magic mask more to get an edge like this properly, rather than like hair detail and the finer areas. So let me bring it in a second time, not here, but separately. But this way I have a hard mask. I don't have the hand, but the hand is also not reflecting green. So if I just need to fill the green holes, I need the parts of the guitar which are reflecting the green screen, like mostly that edge that we saw earlier. I can use this instead of my holdout mask that I had to create with painful rotoscoping of some blob here. All right, and with keying and then either rotoscoping or magic mask, you can come up with a result like this. I hope you enjoyed this. This specific result is from the certification training Fusion in DaVinci Resolve, which you can get the download package also from Blackmagic Design, or I am teaching the entire course as a video course. I am also offering more advanced compositing training if you want to check that out. For the magic mask, I think this video, I hope, was comprehensive. You see, I'm rarely using the magic mask alone. I might combine it with a second magic mask, or with some rotoscoping, or with some keying, and then I can get really, really good results. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you want to hear next, and see you next time. Cheers.